Welcome back, everybody. Chuck Nasty on Fantasy Football here. It is Thursday, the second best day of the week, besides Sunday, I guess. Good game tonight. Seahawks, Rams. We'll get into that in my pick'em choices towards the end of this as well. But right now, those of you that are new to the stream, to the channel, you tune in here to get start sits every single Thursday for the week based on good matchups, bad matchups. You get streaming defenses and waiver wire pickups on Tuesday night. And then you guys can ask any questions you have on your specific roster down below in the comments. So anything I can do to help you guys win your leagues, you let me know. We're in this together. The vast majority of you are not in any leagues with me, so we are not competing with each other. I would rather help you guys make some money as well. So sharing the knowledge. But tonight we're doing Stardom Situm. I'm going to go through some players that have good matchups and players that have bad matchups and players that you should leave on the bench this week. If you guys are interested in continuing to support the channel, share it with a buddy or drop the subscribe button down there below. Hit that bell so you're notified anytime that I drop a video that may help you win your league or at least make playoffs. It helps support me as this is something that I do outside of my current 9-to-5 job. I appreciate it a lot. So let's get right into it. Stardom running backs. We're going to start with Mark Ingram. All right. Baltimore Ravens. You know, he didn't have a good week last week because they kind of had this surprise blowout against the Cleveland Browns. Nobody really saw that coming. I thought that Lamar and the Baltimore Ravens were going to have a better outing, but they have a pretty good matchup this week against Pittsburgh, and they've allowed 113 rushing yards and 28 fantasy points to opposing running backs. So if that isn't sweet enough for you to fire up Mark Ingram this week, just remember that the Baltimore Ravens run the ball 49.3% of the time. I like Ingram a lot this week. Next up, Marlon Mack. Now he's currently dealing with a bit of an injury. And if he's not limited in practice, I'm okay firing him up this week in what's going to be a pretty big shootout against the Chiefs. If he is out or in a limited practice on Friday, fire up my boy Nyheim Hines. Now, the reason I say this, there's not a ton of people that are like, Nyheim Hines, what's wrong with you? Yeah, I get it, but it's going to be a negative game script where the Colts are going to be trailing the majority of the game, if not the entire time, which gives Jacoby Brissett, he absolutely has to throw it. That is just how that game script is going to work if he's playing from behind. And Jordan Wilkins is not the passing down back in Indy. That is Nyheim Hines. So, you know, I could definitely see him getting 10 to 15 passes out of the backfield. If you're in a PPR league, he's a must start if Marlon Mack is out. So just keep that in mind. But Kansas City, ultimately, has been handing out free fantasy points like it's Halloween candy to opposing running backs, giving up 25 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Not a bad DFS play if you're a DFS player as well, or if you absolutely are in bad shape in a PPR league, Nyheim Hines is your guy. Next up, Derrick Henry against the Buffalo Bills at home in Tennessee. Now, Derrick Henry's kind of that bell cow that's keeping Tennessee alive this year. He's playing 60% of the offensive snaps and ranks 7th in touches among his peers. The craziest part is that Derrick Henry had 27 carries last week. So the Bills, I know what you're thinking, right? The Bills are a good defense. Why would I start Derrick Henry? Well, the Bills are a great defense against wide receivers. They're a great defense against quarterbacks. They limited Tom Brady to 4 last week. And they're a great defense against tight ends because they want you to run the ball. So if anybody's going to score points, it's Derrick Henry in this offense this week. Next up, Devonta Freeman against the Houston Texans. Now, Freeman finally had a couple of decent weeks. He had 30.5 combined fantasy points in the last 2 games, and he's finally getting, into doing some damage in the passing game. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm a Devonta Freeman owner myself, but nobody allows running backs to get more catches out of the backfield than the Houston Texans. So fire him up in PPR leagues this week. The law firm of Williams and McCoy in Kansas City. Now, Indianapolis is allowing almost 5 yards per carry to opposing running backs. So I think the Chiefs are going to be winning a lot of this game. I think most people would agree with that. which means they're going to be running the ball to control the game script. Now, the unique part of this dynamic is that LaShawn McCoy has been a constant. Damian has been out the last couple weeks, and Darrell Williams has kind of plugged that spot. If Damian Williams is out, Darrell Williams is a flex play. If Damian Williams is in, you might as well bench Darrell. I know it's confusing, a bunch of D's, a bunch of Williams, but start LaShawn McCoy. If you have Damian Williams and he's active and playing, start Damian Williams. That's all you need to know. Next up, Wayne Gallman plays against the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota is 19th in points allowed to the running back position, so not terrible, not great. And Gallman's really established himself as an upside RB2 while Saquon's out. If you haven't seen the videos of Saquon warming up in practice today, a week after getting a high ankle sprain, this man is superhuman. It is what it is. His timetable of 4 to 6 weeks is going to be more like 1 to 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if Saquon was back next week. Next up, Jordan Howard, Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Jets are pretty good against the run. They're 8th in points allowed to the running back position. And Howard's snaps, among everything else, spiked this past week against the Packers at home in Lambeau. Finished with 18 touches, 115 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So the interesting part, and kind of what the Eagles have all been about, is riding the hot hand. This is why I'm anti-Miles Sanders this week, and I am plus Jordan Howard. I think with that performance and getting all those touchdowns and those yards, he's earned himself a couple of extra carries this week. And it might bode well in a matchup where they're probably going to be leading against the Jets. So I think he's probably a pretty good play this week. Royce Freeman, of none other than the Denver Broncos. Rest in peace to a halfway decent season this year. It is what it is. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm still going to rep my squad. I'm not a bandwagon guy, but really unfortunate. Hopefully we can at least beat Miami to the number 1 overall draft pick, but I don't think we're winning that race either. So Royce Freeman plays against the Los Angeles Chargers, who are 26th in points allowed to the running back position. Chargers have given up 161 total yards on 32 touches and 1 touchdown per game to opposing running backs. So Freeman had 45% of the touches in the Broncos backfield over the last 2 weeks, and he's out-targeted Phillip Lindsay in the passing game 11-6. So if there's a guy to start in a matchup this week, it is Royce Freeman against the Chargers. My last running back to start for the week, Jaylen Samuels. I own this man everywhere. I would never pray for an injury on anybody, but if James Conner happens to be out for an extended period of time, I might just win all 8 of my leagues at the same time. He's one of those guys that can totally change the dynamic of your fantasy team and give you a solid chance of making the playoffs. Game-changing, season-changing running back. But the first couple weeks, especially week 3, he didn't get a single touch against the 49ers. And it seemed like they really, really tried to get him involved in week 4 on Monday night, and they did just that. 18 touches, 8 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. So the dynamic is he's obviously a second to James Conner, but he hasn't been used as much in the first couple weeks. His usage has increased, and Conner left with an ankle injury only to return at the end of the game. So Conner's probably going to play this week, but Jaylen Samuels was running out of the Wildcat formation. He threw the ball 3 times. You might get quarterback points on top of his PPR receptions, on top of his carries, if they continue to run him out of the Wildcat formation. So just an added value to those of you that don't own him already, but those of you that do own him, he's probably got a pretty good matchup this week because Baltimore is 28th in points allowed to the running back position. Let's go over some sits at the running back position. I only have a couple. One of them pains my heart. I was huge on drafting him every this year. Super stoked about him as a player, but the matchup is just bad. Josh Jacobs across the pond against the Chicago Bears. Now, Jacobs put up 12.8 last week, but the Bears' D is not having it. 1, this is a revenge game for Khalil Mack. Expect him to be in that backfield every single down. 2nd, the defense is allowing only 3 yards per carry this season. I don't think it's going to go any different this Sunday. I'm expecting the Bears to win that game and that defense to be all over Derek Carr and Josh Jacobs in that backfield. I'd park him on the bench this week. Miles Sanders. You already heard my spiel earlier about Jordan Howard and how Eagles want to ride the hot hand. Well, the hot hand is not Miles Sanders this week. And I really don't know what's going on with his backfield. Miles Sanders is returning punts? Why would you have your number one running back returning punts? You wouldn't. Is he the true number one back? I'm not sure. I'm parking him on the bench until I find out. Next up, Peyton Barber. I'm sorry. Almost threw up. I've talked about the Tampa Bay backfield way more than I actually should this year. I don't think that either of these two guys are somebody that I feel comfortable starting, and it makes me want to throw up. It is what it is. But Peyton Barber's snaps and touches have declined in the past couple of weeks. And to be quite honest, Ronald Jones looks a lot better than Peyton. The Saints are giving up the fourth fewest points in fantasy to running backs, so I'm sitting them this week. Not even worth it. Last running back sit of the week is Matt Breida against Cleveland. He's running really well this year. I'm a Breida owner myself. I own him in Dynasty. I'm going to have him probably for the next 5 years or as long as he's in the NFL. I have no plans to trade him. However, the goal line work's getting poached by Jeff Wilson. Raheem Mostert's taking a ton of the work between the 20s. What does that leave for Matt Breida? I'm not sure. It's his first week back after bye. Maybe it'll show me something that makes me confident in starting him next week, but I don't want to start him against the Cleveland Browns, who are averaging 3.9 yards per carry to opposing running backs this year. I'll pass. Let's get into some quarterbacks. Kyler Murray. We're going to start him. The schedule's tough to start the year. He played against Detroit, who's actually pretty good. Baltimore, who's pretty good. Carolina has a top defense this year, and Seattle. 3 of those 5 teams, of those 4 teams, are top defenses. Top 5 defenses? So his matchups haven't been good, but he has a sweet matchup this week against the 32nd ranked team, Cincinnati Bengals. I would fire him up. I had a couple of questions. One of my boys, Flash, asked me earlier whether or not I would start him over Dak Prescott. I wouldn't, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't start him if you don't have another good option. So just keep that in mind. Remember, specific roster questions, you can always drop in the comments. I'll reply back to you, let you know what I think. Hopefully it can help your team. If it can't, I'm so sorry. I apologize in advance. Tom Brady against Washington. Now, rough game last week, tough matchup against the Bills, but he's playing against Washington. Do I need to say anything else? Okay, fine. How about the Washington Redskins have allowed 10 passing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks in 4 weeks? If you're a DFS player, I know that I have Tom Brady in a couple of lineups. I think he's going to have a big week, and it's going to be one of those bounce back FU weeks. Tom Brady's coming in hot. Start him up. Dak Prescott against Green Bay. Now, Green Bay has been really, really good against the pass and really, really poor against the run. But if the Cowboys were smart, they would use a ton of play action passes. Dak ranks top 5 in quarterback rating when he uses play action in 2019. I expect him to be doing a lot of dump offs to Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield if they want to win that game at home. Last quarterback to start, Jacoby Brissett against Kansas City. He's 9th in fantasy points among quarterbacks and has multiple touchdowns in every single game this year. The Chiefs are averaging 276.5 passing yards and 20 points to opposing quarterbacks. It's going to be a shootout. Brissett's going to be playing from behind. Expect him to be throwing the ball a ton. Let's talk about some QBs to sit this week. Baker Mayfield, or Baker Mayday, as I have recently changed one of my fantasy teams to. He might even be in the waiver wire column, not the sit column. But he's playing against a good defense in San Fran this week, who's looking to stay undefeated, and they're playing on the road. I'll pass. There's got to be another option for me. Daniel Jones, a.k.a. Danny Dimes, a.k.a. Manuel Jones. Now, he had a bad week last week. He had a tough, I would say a tough matchup, but he had a tough outing. 12.3 points against the Redskins. This week, he should probably be benched because he plays against the Minnesota Vikings, who allow only 15.3 average points to opposing quarterbacks. Park him on the bench. Plug somebody else in. Marcus Mariota against Buffalo. This is probably not a surprise to you, as I personally am not a big believer in Marcus Mariota. However, if you are one of those guys that are chasing the points and you see that, hey, he put up 23.3 against the Falcons, he gets the Buffalo Bills this week. Do I need to say that again? They held Tom Brady to under 4 fantasy points. Surely you've got a better option. Park him on the pine. Last quarterback to sit, Kirk Cousins. This probably isn't a surprise to you, but given his sweet matchup against the New York Giants, he hasn't scored over 13 fantasy points even against the Oakland Raiders. This game script reads so positive for Minnesota that they're going to be running the ball all game long. Expect another post-game interview with Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs about how pissed off they are the team doesn't throw the ball. Bad day for Kirk Cousins throwing. Great day if you're a Dalvin Cook owner. Just keep that in mind. Let's talk about some wide receivers. We're going to start Julian Edelman. Now, he had a bad week last week. Tough matchup against the Bills. He saw a little bit of Tre'Davious White. But if you haven't noticed, the Buffalo Bills are the real deal. I keep talking about them, not because I like the Buffalo Bills. I don't. They have a great D, and I wish that I owned them. But they're playing against the Redskins this week, and they are awful against slot receivers. They have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers that line up inside in the slot, which is 70% of what Julian Edelman does. This is his bounce back game. Start him up. Tyler Boyd against Arizona. He had a bad game last week. Pretty much everybody on the Bengals team had a bad game on Monday night, thanks to Andy Dalton and their primetime showing. However, that game was embarrassing, but they play against the Arizona Cardinals this week. That's good news for anybody. They've allowed 4 tight ends and the 3rd most fantasy points to slot receivers, which is where Tyler Boyd lines up. Guess who's scoring points this week, baby? Tyler Boyd. Next up, Larry Fitzgerald on the other side of the ball, playing against Cincinnati. Now, Christian Kirk's probably not going to play this game. It's going to free up some targets. And even I think that the Dalton and the Dalton Army and the rest of the Bengals are probably going to be leading at some point in that game, which forces Arizona to throw. Gives Larry Fitzgerald some more upside, and the Bengals don't have a good defense. So, start him up. I don't know why you'd bench him anyways. It's Larry freaking Fitzgerald, man. Hall of Fame wide receiver. Come on. Adam Thielen against the New York Giants. This one might surprise you in my stardom column. If you have been following this channel for a while, there's a video that's talking about the NFC North and players not to draft due to changes in their offensive coordinators. Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs were both on that list for me, so I own them nowhere. Not a big fan. I know what Stefanski does, and it is run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. However, playing against the New York Giants, I mentioned that already, but they give the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers that line up on the outside, which is where Adam Thielen lines up. If they throw the ball 10 times, if Kirk throws the ball 10 times, Thielen's still going to have a good day. So you got to start him this week. I'm sorry. Calvin Ridley against Houston. Ridley's been kind of a dud the last couple of weeks, right? I mean, admittedly, I told you guys to start him against the Colts, and he laid an egg. I'm really sorry. He let me down that week. But he's got to bounce back at some point. He has a really favorable matchup against the Houston Texans, who have allowed the 3rd most points to wide receivers that line up on the outside. Calvin Ridley runs 85% of his routes from the outside. This is his week, baby. This is his week. Will Fuller against Atlanta on the other side of the ball. I just talked about Calvin Ridley. Here's the other upside guy on the other side of the ball. He's number 12 in air yards so far. He's having a good year. Great, not really, but he had a massive, massive play where he just absolutely blew back the corner. Would have been in for a 75-yard score and was overthrown by Deshaun Watson last week. I just have a feeling he's going to pop off. This is a gut read. Atlanta is also 28th in points allowed to the wide receiver position. Just trust me. Philip Dorsett with the New England Patriots plays against the 32nd ranked Washington Redskins. Now, he hasn't really had good production so far, but he's had some positives, right? He had 9 targets against the Bills D, and he's had 20 targets through 3 weeks. So he's right behind Josh Gordon. I just think he's going to have a blow-up game. This is a great matchup to do it. Next up, MVS, also known as Marquez Valdez-Scantling. for the Green Bay Packers, playing against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if he's not available or you don't own him anywhere, Geronimo Allison might be on the waiver wire. That's somebody that you could definitely play this week. Devonta Adams is probably not going to play. He had turf toe issues. They're saying that it's not too serious for him to have surgery or anything like that, but it's unlikely he's going to play, which means he's not going to play. So fire up a number one wide receiver in this offense. It could be MVS. It could be Geronimo. My money's on MVS. I think he's a great play against Dallas, who's 12th in allowed fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Auden Tate. All right. Now, I'll tell you a funny joke about him in a little bit, but John Ross is out. So that leaves Tyler Boyd and Auden Tate. Tate is 6'5", and this man is more like a damn tight end. Tight ends against Arizona are absolutely demolishing in fantasy points. So if he looks like a tight end, runs like a tight end, and acts like a tight end, maybe he's going to score points like a tight end against the Arizona Cardinals. So feel like he's got a good week coming. I'm plugging him in with my buddy Ryan this week, and hope he has a good one. Last guy to start, Deontay Johnson. You probably knew that was coming, but he's got a sweet matchup against Baltimore, who's 22nd in points allowed to the wide receiver position. Now, the Steelers have totally given up on Dante Moncrief, which was a little upsetting for me. I drafted him in a couple leagues thinking he has big upside, big playability, and then he dropped 7 of his 10 targets like in his hands, no receiver or no defender around at all, just had no intention of catching the ball in the first week, and I knew that I had royally effed up. But it is what it is. So the last couple of games, 6 for 77 and 1 touchdown, 3 for 52 and 1 touchdown. They don't let Mason Rudolph throw the ball down the field very much, but when they do, it's to Deontay Johnson. So just an upside guy in case you needed him. A couple of sit targets before we go into my picks for the week. Emmanuel Sanders against the Los Angeles Chargers. That hurts my heart. I love my boy, Manny Sanders. But he draws Casey Hayward this week. He's one of the best corners in the NFL. And in the last 4 matchups that Sanders has had against Casey Hayward and the Chargers, he has had 68 or fewer yards and 4 or less catches. So I don't like my odds. I don't think that he goes and changes that stigma this Sunday. Corey Davis against Buffalo. First of all, were you actually considering starting Corey Davis? Are you chasing points that have somewhat of a relation to do with Marcus Mariota? Don't do it. It's a trap. Either way, he had the best week of his season so far, putting up 20.1 fantasy points last week against the Falcons. But A, his QB is still Marcus Mariota, and B, he draws Tre'Davious White in Buffalo this week. Don't do it. Buffalo's got a great defense. It doesn't matter that they're playing at home in Tennessee. It's just not an ideal matchup to start. Scary Terry McLaurin is playing against the New England Patriots. Now, he missed last game with a hamstring, but he draws Stephon Gilmore and the New England Patriots, who haven't allowed a single passing touchdown to a receiver on the outside this season. I'll pass. Last but not least, Tyrell Williams. Now, playing across the pond against the Chicago Bears, and he scored in his last 4 games, so you might be tempted to plug him in there. But it seems like he's actually been pretty touchdown dependent. If you look at his stats, he's had 111 yards in 3 games. That's not good. But because he's gotten a touchdown, it's saved his fantasy value each of those weeks. He gets a tough draw this week against a nasty Bears defense. Throw him on the bench. Now, real quick, let's go into a couple of my picks for the week. I got a couple of work buddies that use this to make some of their fence picks on the pick'em. Let's get into it. So, what we got here, Thursday night battle. Seattle Seahawks and Pete Carroll are 25-5 on primetime TV matchups. I'm going with Seattle at home. New England against Washington, that's a no-brainer. I'm pretty sure that the Patriots decided that they were actually going to play this game and not start all their second and third stringers. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's going to be a blowout. New Orleans against Tampa Bay. I'm taking New Orleans. They got a good defense. I feel like Jameis goes back to his usual self after that crazy performance last week against the Rams. I'm taking the Saints. Minnesota on the road against the Giants. Chicago across the pond against Oakland. Philadelphia at home against the Jets. Carolina's super solid defense against Secret Garden Minshew at home, taking Carolina. Arizona and Cincinnati is a battle of two 0-4 teams. I'm not sure who's going to win that. I don't know if it even matters. I'm going to go with Kyler Murray's first win on the road, even though the Bengals are favored to win by 3.5. I'm taking Buffalo on the road against Tennessee. I'm assuming Josh Allen's going to play. If he doesn't, I would probably flip my pick to Tennessee. I'm also taking the Houston Texans at home against Atlanta. I'm taking Baltimore on the road against Pittsburgh. Chargers at home against Denver. Dallas at home against Green Bay. Kansas City at home against Indy. And San Fran at home against Cleveland. If you've got any questions about what we talked about in the video, or you have specific player-related roster questions that I didn't cover in here, make sure you drop them in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button for your boy. Help support the channel. Don't share it with any of your league mates, but maybe share it with friends that are in different leagues or something that I might be able to potentially help as well. And let's do some damage this week. But first, an interesting fact. Somebody was asking me whether they should start Golden Tate or Auden Tate. And I actually heard a joke that AU stands for gold on the periodic table. So if you take out the AU and you throw gold in there, you actually have Golden Tate against Golden Tate. Mind blown. Have a good week this week.
Goodbye.
It's not goodbye, son. See you later.